Hey, this is Edithson Abelard from Passion 47, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about creating property draws or editing your property draw with attributes. In the last video, or in the last lesson, we spoke about how do you customize this property draw with an editor script. Now, that takes a little more time, and it definitely has a lot under its belt, but let's say you just have this information here. We have our student section and we have our, I'm going to say our class section, but right now they're just mashed together. So it's really hard to tell the difference between them. And as you add more, especially when you have like 20, 30, which I'm not a fan of having 20, 30 public attributes because that just means you're doing too much in one script. But let's say you do have a bunch, you just need to organize them. Well, that's what I'm going to teach you today. It's how to organize them. First thing I want to do is I want to be able to separate what this is and what this is, because I think these two should be together. So if I just pull up our script here, you can see in my code I actually separate them. So let's start off by first talking about titles. If I go ahead and add an attribute, I'm just going to add our brackets and add header. And all I want to do now is to simply add a title here. So I'm going to call this student info. We don't need to make it a long thing. So I'm going to add student info here, and I'm going to add class info here. And all that's going to do, if we jump back into Unity, let this thing script up. There you go. So now you can see that all it does is it adds a title above our content, and then it adds a little spacer here to separate them. And just by adding just that little bit of functionality, which really wasn't that difficult, it's just adding a header, really an attribute there, or a method attribute, we're able to quickly separate and group together like items. Now, let's say we're not done here. With this minimum lesson, maximum lesson, and number of lessons, I want to actually be able to control this just a little more. I want to separate the class name from all this lesson information. So let's go on to our next property draw attribute, and that is spacer. So if I do the same thing, just add those in real quick, and I add the word space. And with this one, all it does is accept an integer. So let's say I want it to be 15. This is just an arbitrary number. It's actually in pixels. So if I go back to our, we'll let this thing load up real quick. Boom. Now we have a spacing. Now I'd like to have these things the same, and because I didn't manually set that, we can go ahead and change this value until we find one that we like. But as you can see now, we just have a small space in between them just to give us a little visual cue that these two items are different. But like I said before, Unity was made to hack, and this is just the beginning. There are a number of more opportunities for us to keep customizing our property draw. Now, something else that I spoke about in the last video is limiting some of the attributes. Right now I have a min and max, which is great. You can set your min and max to whatever. Not very useful as a developer because you know what happens when, you know, like we do a lot of CSS work, right? A lot of front-end engineering. And the problem that we find is when you give designers access to code, they break things. And so you really want to just limit what they do. So what we can actually do here is we can use something called a range attribute. And the way the range works is we have a few parameters. Let me actually pull up our mono-develop. So let's say number of lessons. We're going to range that. So I'm just going to add range, and you'll see it show up. And range accepts, actually, let me go back. So you can see it accepts a minimum and a maximum. So just like we did with the editor scripts, we're going to give it a minimum range and a maximum range. You can't have a class without at least one. So I'm going to give it 1 as the minimum range, and the maximum I'm going to say 25 because I'm liking that number today. We're going to hit save, drop this down, Just let it catch up. And boom, now we have a range slider. So now we know we can go in between these two, 1 and 25. Now, right now it's set to float. You can make it an integer as well, but you know, the main goal here was just to limit what we can and can't do. So technically, this whole minimum and maximum, we can make these private and not even worry about them anymore, because now we know that the number of lessons will either be 1 or 25. So then now we don't have to worry about setting it up here and, you know, somebody adding more or less lessons. So that's how you use the range slider. Another one that I really like as well is when you have a description. I actually don't have something here for the class description, but let's go ahead and add one. I'm going to first add a spacer. I'm just going to separate these just a little bit so it kind of matches what we see. I'm going to add a space, and we'll make it a pretty decent space. And I'm going to add another public. And if you've never used C# and you've been following me and seeing all the JavaScript things I've been doing, I wanted to make a change and show both sides, because I've been getting a lot of how do you do this in C# also. So I'm going to switch in between them, but I'll definitely explain some of the JavaScript things later. And also push all this to Git, so you can also just download it and see it for yourself. So let's say we have a public string, and we want to call this description. Now we don't have to set this to anything, but let's go ahead and set it to my new class. If I can spell it right. My new class is all about hacking Unity. Alright, so now if we go back into Unity, we'll see two things. We'll see the spacer and we'll see the description. Awesome. But what if we wanted to maybe make this multiple lines, like a text field? Because if I keep typing in here, oops, if I just go ahead and keep typing, we'll get this. And although that's useful to be able to have a long string, what I really want for a description is I want multiple lines. So let me show you how to do multiple lines. Let's pull up MonoDevelop, and along with having a space there, we're going to add, same thing as before, we're going to add textarea. Still a method. Now it needs to know a number of lines. So first we want to say the maximum number of lines, which is, this is before a scroll bar shows up. So let's say 10 lines. And the second one is just a minimum number of lines. And I like 3 as a nice minimum, because 2 is just not really a text area. So we hit save, and we just wait for this to load up. Alright, there you go. So now we have our text area. Now as you can see, boom, now it goes into a scroll bar. So now you can keep changing this and making this, you know, something that you're more comfortable with. Right now we're only seeing 3 because I set it to 3. We can go ahead and set this to maybe 5 and go back and wait. And so now, there you go. It just takes a little bit of time to propagate. But now we have a description field. And this is much more effective than actually having just our string, because we know we want this to have space to, you know, to actually put in some real content. So those are some really quick ways to just jump into your script and just separate things and make them just a little more customized, without having to go deep into the editor class. There are a few more attributes that we can use, but I think 10 minutes is enough for a video. So in the next one, I'm going to show you some more ways you can combine attributes and some more ways that you can just organize your code. Now soon I'm going to start going into some more heavy details, like importing assets and being able to change some things. once they're imported. But I think it's really important, especially in the beginning, for you to learn to organize your code. Not just create the code, but organize it. Because once we have a nice set of standards, then when things get complicated, we'll at least be able to follow them. So this has been Edithson Abelard. Please check out our blog, check out our website, passion47.com. If you're in New York, I'm actually going to be doing a few more talks here about Unity. So if you're around, please, I'll definitely post some things online, and we'll keep tweeting and posting about them. But I'm definitely going to be talking about this in more detail. So Edithson Abelard, I'm out.